as an author, I consider him a professional reframer.
The real test of whether people believe the science is whether they're willing to change their minds when new evidence comes up.
After you read them, you see the world in potentially different ways.
As humans, we sometimes tend to be like, we say, yeah, but that actually is a shutting down versus an invitation. Sort of a saying I don't know invites an opening that creates more spaciousness for understanding.
The social media doesn't allow us a graceful way to change our minds about something in public.
Before that thing, you were one person, and then after that thing, you were forever changed.
Welcome to Reframe. My name is Mike Wang.
I'm Cyan Bannister.
We're your co-hosts. Today, we have a special guest, Neal Stephenson. Get excited.
Doesn't seem to
Be anyone around.
I
think we're alone now.
Something, something, something.
We don't need to know what the lyrics are. Yeah.
Suddenly, there's people watching through the camera. Hi, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm great.
Yeah. How are you feeling? Give me 3 words.
Oh, man. I am excited, super pumped, if that's a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and nervous.
Yeah. Excited,
They're probably
pumped,
all
and nervous.
parts of the same coin,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
how I feel.
Yeah.
How about you?
How am I feeling? I'm feeling loose. The initial, some other episodes, I felt more like a little wound. I feel loose, more relaxed. I feel creative. And I feel a little mischievous.
Ooh,
Like
mischievous.
playful mischievous. Yeah.
I'm excited to see how this plays
Yeah,
out.
we'll see. Yeah. Weirdly, I would say normally I feel, I've said in past episodes, I feel nervous, but today it's a little lighter.
Well, it's not your first rodeo
Now,
anymore.
yeah. I know. Yeah. So I'm so excited. We have a great show today. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well, what is our
excited.
show about? Like, why are we here?
Yes. So our show is, as you know, Reframe. I was most moved by our conversations around how we experience seeing the world differently. And I know you were moved by that. And I believe we came up with this intention to explore this because we both believe that words are spells, stories are spells, art is a spell. And you had a line do you want to share the question that you've been asking people about something that moved them? Because I think this is the anchor, and then I can share the why.
Which one? I don't know which one.
You went around asking people about, like, is there a piece of, like, art that has moved you?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. So I like to go around and ask people, is there a piece of art or a phrase that someone has told you
Yeah.
or something that you experienced that before that thing, you were one person, and then after that thing, you were forever changed?
Yeah.
Like, you marched through the world differently,
Mm-hmm.
and it made you ideally a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm searching in this podcast for nuggets, insights that our guests have that I and you and our audience can try on, kind of like clothes, and see how they fit.
Yeah.
And when we change our perspectives on the world, we can realize a lot of things that are fiction.
Mm-hmm.
We carry a lot of fictions inside of us. I like to say that we're liars. A lot of people don't want to admit they're a liar, but we're all liars. We lie to ourselves a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing, we don't know we are. We don't understand it. And I think the more we understand it and the more we inspect it, the better we can all be to each other.
Yeah.
And the better humanity can be.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. And I would say the lying often is out of self-preservation. It's to achieve a sense of safety that served us in the past. And I think we're trying to explore what are the
mechanical.
evolutions. Yeah.
Like, there's no ill
Yep.
intent with it. It's just an
Totally.
easier way to explain everything.
Yeah.
Is
So-
to say things with such conviction.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, we started Reframe because we wanted to explore what it would be like to be the best version of ourselves. And hopefully through that journey and trying out other people's reframes, other people could have a chance to do that as well.
Yeah.
Cool. I love that. And I want to anchor on, feel free to add to this definition. We believe reframes are a belief. It could be a practice, an experience that someone has had that has changed the way that they experience life. Or we've talked about how they experience time differently. Does that resonate, or is there anything you'd add to that?
Absolutely. I think it could be reframes in, I think you succinctly put it into like 4 categories. So maybe you could walk us through those.
Yeah, and we want to explore 4 buckets. It could be in career, sort of the intellect side, love, sort of more in the emotional, relational side, well-being, so like a reframe around, physical well-being, and then 4th, spiritual. So those are the 4 reframes.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, let's get into it. What we do I got to check in with you on our 3 anchor questions. How many reframes have you tried since we last met? Is there a story you want to share?
Yeah. So I'm still working on Lee's reframe.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to be working on that for a while. So I'm going to put that one aside for the foreseeable future. But Andrew Main, I'm going to summarize his reframe as you can just do stuff. And even if it's quote unquote bad, doing something sometimes is better than nothing. Sometimes nothing is way better than something, which we can explore another time. But I had the challenge of writing an outline by him, and he was going to give $1,000 to charity. And so I wanted to make sure to get it done before this show.
Yeah.
And so I got the outline done. But
I saw it.
not only that, it inspired me to start writing in my blog again and to start focusing in other ways. Like, is there something in my life that's keeping me from doing stuff? Could it be, I'm spending too much time in my bedroom, or I need to be in an office, or I need to go out and do this other thing and put my body in another place. And so I feel more productive after Andrew's reframe. And it's a simple one. It's just like, and I keep thinking to myself, if he could make a full feature-length film for $200 and debut it at a film festival, what's my excuse?
Yeah.
Totally. I should just make stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's good. It's not for anybody but me and maybe an audience of 1, which is what I like to say about this podcast. Like, I hope that a lot of people will listen to it, but really, I want to make it for 1 person.
Yeah. I love that.
If we can do that, then we stand a chance.
Totally. One follow-up question is, what did it unlock for you? What was the bit that Andrew said in his reframe of just create that unlocked? What did it unlock?
Well, it's just sometimes in order to move forward, you have to apply willpower. Mm-hmm. And it's not, you can sit and dream and have ideas, but dreams don't go anywhere if you don't do something.
Yeah.
And obviously I do a lot of things, and I should know this.
Yeah.
But for the things that are holding me back, what are the barriers that are keeping me from finishing it?
Yeah.
And part of it is all these stories that I tell myself, these narratives I tell myself, excuses. And so I'm just like, no more excuses. Like, just do it.
Yeah, I love that.
It doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable. It doesn't matter if I don't feel like it that day. I've started reframing. This is separate for another episode, but I've started thinking about my emotions without identifying with them. Mm-hmm. And so instead of saying I'm tired, I'm this, I'm just like, oh, tiredness is here. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to identify with it. And that's actually, in conjunction with his reframe, probably the most helpful.
Beautiful.
What about you?
Mine, I have not fully sent Andrew's reframe, shipped. So that is on, I have a month, but that I have not yet fully tried on. In some ways I have, but in the relation of writing, my reframe would be just this perspective of what if life was rigged in your favor. So viewing, I was coming back from a trip, everything from viewing the Lyft driver that picked me up, being a little bit rude and being a little bit snarky, but viewing that as, hey, what if that was a reminder that how I show up is, it could be valuable. How could I brighten, like, how could, as a reminder for me to show up with love versus show up with bitterness. During this trip, I was with my wife. We were on the plane. We got into a little bit of a bickering. We had done all this work in this leadership workshop, and then we were in this place of deep, almost calm and maybe enlightenment. And then we had a little bit of a riff trying to get to the airport. Many fights happen when you're trying to get to the airport on time. All the demons show up on both sides. And I had this moment where I was like, oh no, all the work that we've done shattered. Like how, but then when I'm thinking about what if life was rigged in your favor, was for me, like, rather than fall into that hole of being critical and being down about it, what if I had a moment where I was like, wow, what if this is our test to practice some of the skills we just learned? And what could have been a 3-hour battle turned into a 32-minute, conversation, adventure. And at the end, as the plane was taking off, I just hugged her and kissed her. And we both were like, oh, wow, that's it.
Yeah.
And I think we both viewed it as, yeah, this is a moment and this is life being rigged in our favor, and we're going to show up for it versus being overwhelmed by it. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I've started doing that with travel too, where if I'm running late, I just accept it. And I'm like, look, if the plane takes off, I have to take a different one.
Totally.
Or maybe there's another adventure I'm about to go on that's unexpected.
Yeah. And to pull on and then we'll go to the next piece, but it's such a juicy, to your thing about the lying to ourselves, the story I was telling myself was I was trying to get my wife and I back home to see our daughter. Like, that was the fear. I was like, if that doesn't happen, then she won't be okay. Our daughter's not, that was the story I was telling myself that was creating this lack of safety. So it's the moment I was like, oh, actually, to your point, everything will be okay. This is an opportunity versus a handicap. So anyway, that's my reframe. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. One of my favorite questions, any synchronicities? Do you have any synchronicity stories, coincidences?
Yeah, there's two involving Bobby McFerrin.
Okay.
So one was I invited you to this mystical, magical, musical Monday, in which I didn't tell you
alliteration,
what we were doing.
Yeah.
That's part of the fun of it. And then you, out of the blues, sent me a video of Bobby McFerrin. I didn't watch it yet, by the way, because I was a little freaked out.
Oh.
So I don't know what he did, because I didn't want it to, foreshadow something. I don't know.
Interesting.
And I was like, wow, does Mike know what we're doing on Monday? And so that's why I cryptically was like, hey, do you have any idea what we're doing?
Idea.
And you had no idea.
Yeah.
So this was, I think, Saturday that you sent the video for Bobby McFerrin. And then on Sunday, I was out for a walk and I saw a piece of trash and I thought, I'll pick up that piece of trash and put it in a receptacle. And so I walk over and put it in the receptacle and I'm feeling good about it. And because I didn't understand why someone would just throw a Starbucks cup on the ground. But, and who knows, maybe I'm being judgmental. Maybe it fell out somewhere. But right when I looked down, I found a rock. I took a picture of it. It says, don't worry, be happy. And had I not thrown away the cup, I would have never seen the rock. And so I don't know. I just was like, wow, the universe just winked. That's fun.
Yeah.
I have no idea what any of this means. It just keeps happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, well, I am going to Bobby McFerrin tomorrow, so that's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, the Bobby McFerrin thing was crazy. I don't know. There's no other way to explain it.
Any synchronicities with that, or?
No, I just was like, there's a video that I want you to see because it's him performing on stage in a beautifully creative way, and I don't know. I don't know how that happened.
I don't know either. We'll figure it all out someday. Someday we'll know this could be a natural part of being human.
Yep.
And it's explainable easily with science.
Yep.
But we just don't know. But until then, I'm going to keep asking the question, like, what is it?
Totally. For me, mine was a shared experience. So I was on this trip in Austin we were in a group of people, and this guy was in a car. Let's say it was like some Jeep, like a Jeep. And he was talking about, actually, hey, the car that I really want you guys to see, the car that I wanted is, let's call it a Defender or something else. And he was like describing it in extreme detail. It's like a unique model, this, and this, and this. And then we're driving around Austin, just literally doing, we had a task at hand that we had to do to create joy. And then literally 13 minutes later, there is that exact car.
What?
Right in front of us.
That's a rare car.
And yeah, it was like a Defender with a specific model. Again, I can't remember. And like a specific style. And he didn't even notice it. And I think it was, again, in our school of Mike and Cyan thinking and trying to be more aware and present. I was like, Adam, do you see that this car you were just talking about
It's
13
right
minutes
there.
ago is right in front of you? And he was like, wait, what do you mean? And he looked, and it was, anyway, it sounds so silly. As I say it, there's a judgment to myself, like, why am I bringing this up in conversation? And I'm like, wow, we wouldn't have noticed it. And again, I don't know what it means, what it says, but it's just a piece. So
I think
Yeah.
my current thinking on this is you're on the right path, maybe.
yeah,
That you're paying attention, that you're present, that
Yeah.
you're here, really here.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just kind of like a little wink. It's
Yeah.
like, in the Matrix, they're like, always pay attention to things you see twice. And that's kind of what it is. It's like a
Totally.
weird little glitch,
totally.
just to remind you,
Yeah.
you're here.
Yeah, we're here now. A last question before we bring on our esteemed guest, or as he said, he's just a guest. Since a piece of the show is really to think about moments when we've experienced time differently, when others have experienced time differently, is there a moment that comes to mind where, since we last met, you've experienced time differently?
Yeah. So the last time we talked, I was experimenting with noticing doorways and without judgment. So walking towards the door, there's a door. Standing in the door, I'm in a door. Now I'm on the other side of the door looking back at the door. And my hit rate still for noticing doors is only like 20%. And I'm not going to stop until I feel like I get 100% of the doors. So this could take a while. I might be talking about this for a while.
I'm excited. Yeah.
But what it has taught me is to be more aware of the sounds and the smells and the textures of the paint. And like I now know there's a canopy over our door that I never noticed before. And maybe some of this stuff sounds silly, but it prepares me for when I transition to another room, which I call another universe. Every time you go from one room to another, you're like, it's like a story changing. It's a type of lucid dreaming. It's a new possibility. It's a new frame of mind. It's a, you could be anything you want when you go through the door. And so I've been trying that on more, and I experience time definitely differently. I get more out of my day. I feel more grateful. There's just a lot that's coming from this little experiment, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Cool. I'm excited too. Keep
How
us
about you?
posted on the percentages. That's good.
Yeah, you?
I'll go on this thread post this trip, because when we got back, it was our first trip away from our daughter fully. I came back and I gave my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, I grew up in a Chinese family, hugging was not fully, not a practiced behavior. It could have used a reframe. And I'm kind of like, I work on my hugs. I go for this way, but oftentimes it's with my mother-in-law, it's kind of the side hug a little bit, like a slightly awkward side hug with deep love and some anxiety. And my wife and I basically were like, let's lean into trying to give like a 6-second, 8-second hug to each of them. And I was afraid, and I leaned in and did it. And we did it to both. They both were kind of like trying to release. But in that moment, for me, it probably felt like 20 seconds. And for both of them, upon releasing, like letting go, I think both of them just were teary. And it was really, and I felt more present and connected with them. I could feel the vulnerability. I think both because I was open to that, because it could have been like holding them tight and not letting go, which would have felt constrained. But because I think my energy and intention was for that hug, time moved really, really slowly, and they felt that energy, and I felt very connected to them on
I
Monday.
love all your reframes about family tradition.
Yeah.
They're really special.
Yeah.
And I love learning about your family's traditions through them.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Cyan, do you want to introduce our magical guest that we have waiting in the wings before?
Well, I'm excited to welcome Neal Stephenson, who is probably my favorite author.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to talk to him today about his books. I think he gets asked a lot of questions about his books and, what he's thinking about for the future. And we may get into that a little bit. But I'm more interested in, he's a historian, and how he does a lot of the predictions for the future is delving deep into the past. And as an author, I consider him a professional reframer.
Professional reframer.
He puts out these ideas that after you read them, you see the world in potentially different ways. And so I'm really curious about reframes that he's thinking about, that matter today, that impact our lives, and learning from him in a way that I haven't yet. Mm-hmm. And one of the books that he wrote, and this is all I'm going to get into that, really impacted me. For the listeners, and some people know my story, was homeless, and technology changed my life. I discovered a laptop in the dark. There was a guy sitting on his laptop, Chris Collins, my friend, and I remember walking up to him and asking him, "What is that?" It was magical. And I think of, when I read his books, I see myself in them. I see myself as the female characters that he puts into them. And I think a lot of people do. And one of the things it taught me, along with my friendships and the hacker groups that I fell into, is that I was capable of doing anything. And so, I consider it an amazing gift to have him here today. Mm-hmm. And I can't wait for people to meet him in a different way.
Amazing. Shall we beam him in?
Let's beam him in.
All right, you ready?
All right.
3, 2, 1. For our guest today, we have Neal Stephenson. Neal, what's up? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm down in San Francisco for a couple of days.
What are you doing here?
Doing a panel discussion this evening.
On what?
Which I don't like to over-prepare for these things. It's something about science fiction becoming reality.
Yeah.
I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. Something that struck me in talking to you last night over dinner is I experienced it as your desire to have spontaneity and presence. You being like, let's not talk too much about what we will say and save it for the show, I think really stuck with me. So that sounds like you're taking that to the panel as well. So I love that.
Well, I think it comes through. People can recognize spontaneity when they see it, but they can also recognize the lack of spontaneity.
Totally. So that's beautiful.
I think people resonate with it more. You're inviting them to participate in something versus seeing something that's canned.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why when I do book tour appearances, over the years I've tended to skew the time more towards question and answer, because you can't fake that.
Yeah, totally. Well, before we get into our reframe, I have just a warm up, 1.5 warm up questions. I think the half you heard us share. How are you feeling? Do you have 3 words to share? How are you feeling in this moment today?
I mean, I'm good. I'm healthy. Knock wood. Family's healthy. I'm productively engaged on a few fronts. I'm working hard on the next book, but I'm also engaged on a startup, Whenere, which we could talk about later if you want. But but basically, I like being busy. I like working on things. I like being engaged at a pretty low nitty-gritty level on projects, and right now I've got the opportunity to do that.
I think we should talk about a startup now.
Yeah, I think now.
Why don't you tell us what you're working on?
So this is a company called Whenere. It's When plus Where, and it's co-founded by me and Karen Lohr, who's a longtime collaborator of mine. She was the texture artist who did most of the texture art on Half-Life 1 and later worked, as you know, at there.com and Forterra.
Oh, Forterra.
Forterra.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the There people went.
Yeah. So she worked at there.com, which is sort of a competitor to Second Life, and Forterra, which was a serious games company. And we started working together about 15 years ago. Anyway, the Whenere is a sort of a response to the fact that in our media industry right now there are these story worlds that that fans just are in love with, and it can be anything. It could be it could be Harry Potter or Star Trek or Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, what have you. But the people who love these worlds are literally insatiable. They can't get enough, and they'll read all the books over and over. They'll watch all the movies and the TV episodes over and over. They'll go to Comic-Con and put a lot of money and effort into building costumes that enable them to kind of be in those worlds among their friends. And movies and video games, TV, they're just too slow and cumbersome and expensive to produce the content that these people want. So they're writing fan fiction, they're maintaining wikis, a very high level of quality and detail about these worlds. So we think that by combining the power of modern game engines, we're using Unreal Engine, and AI, that we can build these worlds or small parts of those worlds at least, and populate them with AI-driven characters in such a way that if you want to go in and experience that story in an immersive way, you hit a button and that happens. But you can also use a simple scripting interface to write your own sort of fan fiction and see it played out in that world with the same assets, the same level of fidelity as the original story, as well as being able to have conversations with the characters and interact with them in a kind of natural way. So that's the project we've been working on now for about a year and a half, where we've been running on pre-seed kind of angel money, thanks to, in part to you guys. Very much appreciated.
Full disclosure, we invested.
Yeah. And so we've got to a point that's exciting and that we think we've proved we can do it. And so now we need to sort of turn our attention to polishing and executing and, building something that we can put out in front of users sometime later in the year.
Yes, and what you saw it, what struck you the most? What moved you?
Well, I have an investment thesis, well, a few of them, but one, I'm looking for things that spark joy. And I think that, I watched some Red Dead, it was, what is his name? Thomas Middleditch, like riding around on a horse, and he's with his friends and they're interacting with these NPCs. And that got me thinking about, well, what if you could do this in other worlds? Mm-hmm. Like, we're limited right now to these video game characters, but if we could bring in, for example, Severance, mm-hmm. and you could recreate Severance and walk around the office and talk to people, and you make really funny things that make people laugh or tell stories in ways you couldn't do.
Totally.
And then the other thing I started thinking about is how many scripts are out there or stories that people have written that have not been animated, have not been brought to life. Mm-hmm. And so, and the other thing is, I know Karen, she's part of a community that I'm involved with, and she's sharp as a tack, and all of my friends speak very highly of her, and I know she's very talented. And so when I see somebody doing something that is futuristic, on the edge and frontier, that has talent like hers, and then your background with the lore, with the storytelling, and your technical expertise, like you said to me, you like to get down to the metal, and I think you're coding as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we have two sort of primary engineers on the project, but my job, I like to describe myself as the cow catcher on the front of the
Cow catcher?
engineering locomotive. Yeah, so there's always the weird things that come up that need to be kind of figured out that would
Yeah.
waste a huge amount of engineer time if you threw it into their laps. And so I've gotten good at identifying those when I see them coming along, and I say, you guys, please keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. I will try to absorb the pain, of climbing this learning curve and figuring out if this thing is going to be a good thing to integrate into the project. So I've had to learn some new stuff. I think my a few years ago, I was really grumpy and irritable about the fact that so much documentation now takes the form of YouTube videos. I was just like, I don't have time to watch these videos. Just write it down. Write me a document, And now I've resigned myself to it. It's like, I've gotten good at, watching YouTube videos at 2.0 times normal speed while doing something else. So it's a growth opportunity, I think, and so I hope keeps me a little bit agile.
Are you constantly learning?
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
I mean, part of it is just that I think I'm a curious person, and there's a lot out there to be learned. So particularly in the area of tech and engineering, there's so much going on, so many new software packages coming online that are just incredibly capable compared to anything I dreamed of when I was a younger person, and now available for free or cheap. And so it's kind of hard to remember, but unlike just a couple of decades ago, to get access to a really powerful software package or something, you'd have to pay a huge amount of money to get a license, and then you'd have to sort of kind of learn things the hard way. But there's so much power available now to people who want to build things and create things that it's just it's just this unlimited sea of opportunity, and I kind of can't stop tackling new things.
Cool. I have one thread to pull on the with Whenere, and maybe this is a lead into other reframes. What is the world that you imagine? Whenere is fully out and embraced by the world. What is different about the world?
So the existing kind of pipelines for creating media that we can share and enjoy have become kind of sclerotic. They're all kind of choked up and inefficient now, and so in order to bring something to the screen, it's necessary to raise an incredible amount of money, and there's only a few people willing to back those kinds of ventures. And so you've got to work with decision makers and so the allocators of capital who have positions of power in those industries. And I don't think that those are evil people necessarily, but there's only a few of them, and it's just a really cumbersome system. And the kind of the flow of information that drives that decision making, I think is still kind of stuck in the middle of the 20th century. So it's all okay. What's our take from the box office? How do we know whether a project has succeeded or not? Well, in the modern era, there's other ways we can tell immediately if something is succeeding, if people are responding to it, if they're liking it, and we ought to be a lot more agile in the way that we allocate resources to such projects. So where we've ended up with is a system in Hollywood and to a lesser degree in sort of AAA games where there's an extremely high quality bar. So the kinds of people who make movies or who do games have gotten to a point where they kind of insist on and they judge themselves, they judge their work based on very, very high standards of visual and auditory quality, which is great. It's just really expensive and slow. And so a lot of times we instead kind of take some inspiration from soap operas. Because soap operas they're looked down upon in a certain way by people who are higher up the food chain of entertainment, but they are incredibly popular, profitable franchises that go on for decades, and they're based on a very simple kind of production modality. We've got a couple of sets, some furniture, you got a cast of characters that doesn't change very much. They come in every day. They do their scripts, and again, it doesn't have the level of glamour of a Hollywood premiere, and yet makes a lot of people happy.
It's gripping.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that's kind of a theme that we keep circling back to when we're talking about. So what's the bar that we're initially trying to meet in Whenere?
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I had this. That's in this image of this set that you describe in soap opera. I think it's not the Marvel. When I think of Marvel, it's about the explosions, the design, the costumes. I had an unlock in my brain just now. The soap opera is about connection, or it's about emotion.
Well, also think about who watches them.
Yeah.
One of the number one occupations we don't talk about are stay-at-home moms.
Yeah.
And they tune in during nap time.
Yeah.
Or why the washing machine is running or something like that.
Yeah.
And then that's their entertainment for the hour.
To feel and to drop in, to feel something or to engage. That's really powerful.
And that's the audience you're talking about. Cyan is one that has been, completely ignored by the game industry. Or I shouldn't say completely. There's always exceptions.
Casual games or things like that.
Yeah. So so we think there's opportunity there.
Thanks for sharing.
Awesome.
Should we go to?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to kick us off?
Which part? I don't have the notes.
More the before and after reframe.
Oh,
Who were you before? And
so the way that we did this before, Neal, is we would have you describe who you were before the reframe and then state the reframe, because this isn't an interview. It's different. And then what happened afterwards. But we're going to change it up a bit. Because it wasn't flowing. It was too all over the place. So we're going to start with the reframe. So the show's called Reframe. One of the things we'd love for you to share is a recent reframe that you had about the world. And just tell us what it is. And then what I'd like to know is who you were before it. And then what changed in you after and what you're doing about it.
Yeah. Happy to. This is a thing that I became aware of through a conversation with Jonathan Rauch, who's a writer who has a Substack. You can find his work pretty easily. But he published a book not long ago called The Constitution of Knowledge, which is sort of about this problem that we have, that we can't agree as a society on what's sort of real anymore. And one of the things he talked about was an American philosopher from the late 1800s named Charles Saunders Peirce. And Peirce had a philosophy called fallibilism. And unlike some philosophies, this one is incredibly easy to understand and describe. It just basically means you might be wrong. And it's okay to maintain an awareness, that you might be wrong in your beliefs. So I started reading into it a bit and learning about Peirce's work. He kind of goes through four levels of he talks about the what he calls the fixation of belief. So people are naturally in a state of kind of irritation or anxiety if they don't have if they don't know what to believe. And so what are some strategies that people have used to resolve that anxiety and feel better? And the first method is called the method of tenacity, which just means you stick to what you believe. Yeah, it's very easy to, we've all met people who just believe what they believe, and you can't argue with them. But then as Peirce puts it, even for those people in their saner moments, they have to be aware that lots of people have different opinions. And so you can't have a society where everyone's following the method of tenacity with different opinions. And so the next one is the method of authority. The method of authority is you just pick a person, a leader, or maybe it's a book, but it's something that you just unquestioningly agree in. And if you can get enough people to all follow the same authority, then you have kind of the basis for a society. But we all know ways that can go wrong. Mm-hmm. So the third one is what he calls the a priori method, which is sort of an awkward designation, I think. But basically, it's let's be reasonable. It's the let's be reasonable approach. And so it's kind of what you see most people doing when they're carrying out discussions of things on the internet. So it's like, okay, well, let's look at the facts and let's structure some arguments, and come up with logical reasons to believe what we believe. And that's a tricky one because it seems reasonable, like of course that's what you should do. But the problem is that it's very easy to kind of inadvertently go astray and end up going into wrong conclusions that you believe in all the more strongly because you believe you got to them through a rational argument. So he talks, for example, about, say, the early Greek astronomers who were definitely rational people, very intelligent, strong thinkers. But they had opinions about astronomy that were just totally wrong, like planets moving on epicycles and all that kind of thing. So to talk to these guys, you would think that they had arrived at, their theories through a rational chain of reasoning, but they were still wrong. So finally, he gets to the what he calls the scientific method, or kind of fallibilism, which is sort of similar to that, to a priori, but basically it's just don't be so sure of yourself. The way science works is you can have a theory for a while, you can believe it, but you understand how you got there, and you're willing to change that opinion if new evidence comes along. You don't just hold to it dogmatically. So that's kind of a super quick summary of Peirce's philosophy, and what it did for me was kind of crystallize a lot of stuff I had been vaguely thinking for a long time, just reading internet discourse and seeing how people could, apparently reasonable people could fall into certain ideological camps and then become incredibly rigid and intolerant of other views. And so when I saw that, it was kind of like a bell went off in my head, and yeah, I started to just feel more comfortable with not necessarily having a super strong opinion about every possible topic, and trying to be more accepting of different takes on things.
What did you discover some things you were wrong about that surprised you?
Um, I don't know. Maybe we should circle back to it.
Yeah,
I'm not.
we'll circle back to that.
Um,
It's interesting you brought up science and how obviously the scientific method works, but interestingly, in the past 5-6 years, I've started seeing signs come up in people's yards and in their windows that say, trust the science, believe in science. And it's become dogmatic where if somebody comes out with something, a scientific paper, people will just say, well, that's what it is. There's no questioning it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't argue with them. You can't say, well, more research needs to be done, or maybe we don't know.
yeah, like the origin of COVID,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So there was, yeah, when so there's the lab leak hypothesis, but then there's the original one that we were all kind of told to believe, which was that it came from a market, and that one, the idea that it had escaped from wild bush meat being served in a market, was presented to us as the scientific answer, and so when you see somebody saying that, believe the science, what they really mean is that they've got a particular take on it that that they think is supported by science, but it might get overturned later. And so the real test of whether people believe the science is whether they're willing to change their minds when new evidence comes up.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of that. I haven't seen a lot of people say, wow, I was really wrong about that. And I think your reframe is one of the most important reframes we may ever cover on our podcast, because if more people admitted openly that they're wrong, that they've been wrong, and that they're capable of being wrong, it seems like we could move forward as a society with more openness.
Totally.
It just seems like it would be better for us. And, I think obviously the ego's in the way.
Yeah.
It's hard to admit that you were fallible.
Yeah.
Well, people are too quick to ascribe it to sort of evil motives, and so somebody can always go back to the tweet that you posted 2 years ago and say, well, back then you had a different point of view. Look, you're a hypocrite. You're being dishonest, and so the social media doesn't allow us a graceful way to change our minds about something in public.
Yeah, the line that my experience of what you might be wrong reframe is this saying, you might have heard it, is strong beliefs loosely held. And back to what Sienna and I were talking about before at the start of the show around words or spells, even this anchoring of wrong or right, I think is like a false dichotomy. It's not we're seeking truth, or we're seeking a thing, but it isn't about right or wrong. We're just trying to find the thing, and if we can anchor on that curiosity, then it's not about this dogmatic either or. So
I've got a series of, I think it's up to 5 Substack posts now called the Wrong series.
Oh,
so
tell us more.
Yeah.
Well, it's just it's actually started during COVID, and I was looking at just the way discourse happens on social media, and I had discovered Jonathan Rauch's book, The Constitution of Knowledge, and through that discovered Charles Saunders Peirce, and so I started thinking about that word wrong. and going into the etymology of it, how the word gets used, and I wrote it all down. I started writing kind of a series of essays on the subject of wrong, and then they all disappeared because I couldn't figure out where they went.
You lost them?
Yeah, and it turned out I'd gotten a new computer, a PC. I put them all on OneDrive, and
Okay.
I forgot that I had a OneDrive. And so a few months ago, I was poking around somewhere, and suddenly it reappeared. You know, I found all these old essays
Wow.
that I'd written a few years ago. So I've been kind of leaking them out onto Substack.
Excited to see it.
But the first one, the first one's about just describing Peirce's philosophy, and then I wrote one sort of a practical application of these ideas on the topic of geoengineering, and I'd have to go back and the longest one, I have to warn you, is the most recent one. It's about Thomas More.
Okay.
This St. Thomas More, who where I went down a very deep rabbit hole because of the way he used those words.
Okay. I want to hear a little bit about. First of all, we'll definitely link to it and check it out. Thank you for sharing. To Cyan's offering of pre-reframe Neal and then post-reframe Neal. I'm curious, what was pre-reframe Neal like?
I mean, I think I was a little more susceptible to, the whole believe the science kind of argument. And so if I was reading an argument thread on Twitter or something and someone quoted some scientific research, I was more apt to assume that they were correct, and to do otherwise goes against my upbringing and my training, because I grew up in a scientific family, and I don't want to be one of the know nothing kind of knuckle draggers who doesn't believe in science, right? But then I think the thing that I was missing there was just the fact that scientific beliefs and theories change all the time as new evidence comes to light, new ways of interpreting the evidence show up, and there are biases in what even scientists want to believe. So in the case of the lab leak theory, the origin of COVID, it was somehow it was okay to believe that it had come from wild animals in a market, but it was deemed racist or kind of provocative somehow to blame it on a lab leak, and so this atmosphere sort of developed where people who were saying, well, I mean, it is kind of a big coincidence that this started right next to a lab where they were doing research on these very viruses. People who were willing to consider that as a viable explanation were kind of railroaded and kind of shamed and made to feel that somehow they were backing an evil conspiracy theory. So now I'm a bit more, I think, a bit more careful when I hear somebody describing their beliefs as rooted in science, because that's not what science is. Science is a thing that changes all the time, and there's nothing anti-scientific or anti-intellectual about being aware of that fact.
Well, I think in conjunction with admitting that you're wrong, we have to be open to people asking questions, because that's what happened in that scenario. Is if you were asking a question, people said, how dare you ask that question?
Yeah.
And it has this silencing effect where people get afraid to do that, which is actually science, is asking questions constantly and challenging the answers until you get repeatable results, right? And so that's what I saw then. I have a weird coincidence, and I'll have to prove it to you later, but the working title of a book I'm writing is wrong. It's what it was titled
Wow.
first.
Okay.
And so kind of the genesis of this whole show comes from the question I asked myself, which is, what am I wrong about? What truths have I held dear about my family, about my upbringing, about the narratives I tell myself about my past, are just falsehoods. They're just not, or they're
You're saying lying.
perceptions.
Well, you're lying to yourself about it.
Yeah,
wrong.
they're just a
It's wrong.
perception I'm carrying around. And so I think it's a fun coincidence
Yeah, that's crazy.
that this is
Another
happening.
coincidence. Yeah. Well, you might be interested to know then that when I started this, my exploration of wrong, I looked the word up in the Oxford English Dictionary, and it's got many pages of definitions of the word wrong. And the cool thing about the OED is that it gives you the usages and the citations of the word in chronological order. So most dictionaries tend to start with the most commonly used version, but in the OED, it's like an archaeological dig where you can immediately go back to the very oldest usages of the word. And so it turns out that the root of the word is the same as when we talk of something going awry, A-W-R-Y, it means something that's bent or that's gone crooked. So there's some examples where they say, a shepherd's crook is straight, but it's wrong at the end. Or an eagle's beak is straight, but it's wrong at the end. And it's also related to, I think it's related to the word rib. So if you think of the ribs of a ship or the ribs of they're coming off of a straight keel or spine, but they sort of curve around. So it's a word that comes out of Old Norse, I think. And so at a certain point the word kind of forks. It's used both in a literal sense as something that has been bent or curved from a straight beginning, and in the kind of the more figurative sense of a thing that has that's incorrect. Okay, but it's not. The nuance I thought was interesting was that it doesn't imply that it started wrong, that it started incorrectly.
Yeah.
It's a thing that went straight,
But then,
but then somehow got off track or took a wrong.
and it's not. That's really powerful. My brain goes to, and it's not about morality, right? You think about it as right, good versus bad.
Yeah.
The wrong is not bad,
Right.
And in that's an unlock in my brain where it's just curving.
Well, that was a big unlock for
Yeah.
me, which was on a long enough time horizon, things that look wrong end up being right. And for some things. So you'd be like, wow, that went wrong. But 10 years from now, it enables something very big and positive to happen. And it couldn't have happened without the wrong thing,
Without the turn that it took.
without the turn.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like
Yeah.
more of a fork in a road than a wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can find if you look it up in the OED, you can kind of find the point where people start applying the moral sense to it, right? So initially it's a literal straightness versus bent, and then there's we use the word in different ways. Sometimes we mean 2 plus 2 equals 5 is wrong. It's incorrect. It's factually incorrect, but it doesn't have a moral component to it. But other times we say, well, what that person did was wrong. So it can have a really strong moral meaning to it as well. And you can spend hours tracing the definitions and kind of seeing all the different ways that people have used it over the centuries.
That's really cool. We should get the OED for our office.
Yeah.
Words are so
well.
powerful.
In addition to your podcast, or not your podcast, in addition to your Substack, have you thought of doing a podcast about wrongs?
I mean, it's still just developing because I really just discovered this OneDrive kind of by accident a few months ago. And I'm like, oh, that's where that went. And then I had a book that I'd gotten for the Thomas More thing, and I lost that too. I thought I was going crazy for a while, but I finally found it sitting in plain sight. So it's still kind of unfolding as we go.
Well, I'm going to subscribe.
Yeah,
I'm excited about this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just there on Substack. It's called Reframe, but it's easy to find.
Well, other than reading your Substack and reading this book, what advice would you give someone to start their quest towards discovering if they might be wrong?
I think it's valuable to just be able to put names on the 4 ways of fixing belief that I mentioned. So we can all immediately recognize people we've known who follow the method of tenacity or the method of authority. So those are already familiar to a lot of people. The little trickier one that was new to me and changed the way I think about things was the third one, the a priori method, where you can be dealing with a person who appears to be operating, in a rational, sort of good faith manner, but they're at some point their argument's going wrong, and so they're coming to conclusions that you don't have to agree with. But just being able to put names on those and have the awareness when you're talking to someone or you're reading some kind of argument on the internet, oh, I see what that person's doing. That's that person's engaging in a logical fallacy. I think that gives you a lot of power, and can sort of prevent kind of being swayed into an overly self-confident, dogmatic way of thinking. Just the awareness that it's okay, it's fine to not have a dogmatic opinion about everything.
Yeah,
is I think a really valuable tool for people to have, when they're trying to navigate the sea of opinion and dispute that's out there in the social media universe.
Yeah, I think trying on I don't know, and being comfortable saying that out loud and just saying, you know what, I just don't know. I wish more people would do that.
Totally.
I think you see it in general, with scientists and engineers, sort of the better they are, the more senior they are in general, I think the easier it is for them to say that. So, if you're insecure, junior, just getting started, there's a tendency to be a know-it-all. But when you deal with people who really know what they're doing, they're very quick to just say, oh, well, I haven't studied that branch of mathematics or whatever. I wouldn't be competent to voice an opinion on that topic.
To build on that, I think there is it's scientists. I see that behavior. Maybe that's a reframe with some journalists I admire.
I think they're really comfortable with saying, I'll be like, do you know this? And they're like, no, I don't. And it's, for me, it's very jarring. There's a story, there's a voice in my head. I'm like, how do you not know? Again, let's say it's, have you seen Severance and the concept of it? Like, no, I don't. And I'm just, because as humans, we sometimes tend to be like, to mimic competency.
Yeah.
We say, yeah, but that actually is a shutting down versus an invitation. So that's what I'm thinking about. And it's sort of saying, I don't know, invites an opening that creates more spaciousness for understanding. Yeah.
I think people can sense it when
Yeah.
if you're too quick to proclaim yourself an expert on everything, even if they're not consciously twigging to it, they're at some level they're like, I don't think this person really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Look, you said something recently, and I don't remember if you remember saying it, but you said that there's two things that are an existential threat that you view right now, which is one, carbon that we'll figure out, and two is that none of us know what's real.
Yeah.
And I think that this line of thinking helps us navigate a world in which there's deep fakes, in which there's AI pumping out papers that look like they're real and they're hallucinating, with news cycles. Like, I look at X and I see trending these alien structures underneath pyramids, and people think it's real.
Yeah.
And they don't question it because there's no source of authority for news right now. So can you speak to that, about that statement and kind of what you've been thinking about there?
I mean, this is something I've been saying on my last book tour and so on, where those are the two big problems, carbon and that. And carbon has got an engineering solution. It's difficult and expensive, but it's solvable. And the other one, people not agreeing on what's real, that is a hard problem. And I'd love to see a technology that could fix it. But it's not as amenable to just building a big machine, as carbon is. There's a great book called by Barbara Shapiro, who I think is local here, called A Culture of Fact, which is sort of a history of how we started believing in this concept of facts, because it wasn't always a thing. And she sees it emerging from the way that the English legal system worked, where you'd have a judge riding into a town somewhere where a crime had occurred, 6 months ago. They would have to use an algorithm to determine the truth or falsity of the allegations. And so that led to kind of judicial practices that we take for granted now, like no hearsay evidence, a jury of your peers, that kind of thing. And eventually that spilled over into science, the writing of history and a lot of other fields, and kind of became a foundation of the Enlightenment. So there was this time, there was a time before we had facts, and then the concept of facts kind of came along and became rapidly accepted in all these areas and led to this big flourishing of science, technology, wealth, capitalism, and now we've kind of lost it. But the question is, is there a way to get it back? And the only thing I can think of is that the way we got it the first time around was that people could make money from it.
And coffee.
Yeah.
And coffee was part of it.
Enlightenment.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's that coffee house culture that you're talking about in the city of London, 1600s, 1700s. if there's an incentive, a financial incentive for people to actually know what the facts are, then they will care about what the facts are.
Interesting.
If there's, but if it works the other way, if you can make money or get power by lying to people and get away with it, then facts go out the window. And I just don't know how to engineer a system that would get the incentives realigned in a productive way.
Wow.
Well, social media has definitely skewed those incentives, right?
Totally.
Because if it bleeds, it leads. If it's outrageous, you get
Yeah.
the clicks, the engagement, and that's where the monetary incentive is.
Yeah.
So you have to change that somehow.
Yeah.
Subscription fees, like Substack and things like that help, because you can become a credible source of information, and maybe you're fallible sometimes, but you're like 90%, accurate. I've been struggling with that. I don't know what news sources or Substacks or what to believe, if anything.
I mean, it's become a commonplace thing now to just put the word Reddit into Google searches. I do it all the time now. If I'm trying to get some technical information, I'm trying to learn how something works with Unreal Engine or one of those. Just by including the word Reddit in the search, you immediately get much higher quality information because just because they at least have a system. It's not a super complicated system.
It's like a peer review type thing.
Yeah. It's just clicking an up or down arrow.
Yeah.
But that is enough, to produce higher quality results. It's kind of amazing.
Well, the founder of Reddit and the founder of Dig are getting together, and they're going to relaunch Dig. And they're, Dig's mission in the past was to be the front page of the internet, and so maybe, it'll probably compete with X on some level, but maybe we'll start getting back to where technology can solve some of these problems. I think community notes on X helps, and then that caused Meta to roll that out, but. I mean, I'd like to put a clarion call out there that if anybody's listening, this is one of the most important problems to solve for.
Totally.
And so if there's a startup out there or some way to align the financial incentives, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor that someone should work on it.
I mean, David Brin has been working for a while advocating on his Facebook for people to just put their money where their mouth is. So if you're at Thanksgiving dinner having an argument with your Uncle Jim as to whether chemtrails are part of a secret conspiracy, you could just offer to place a bet, and of course the trick is who's going to adjudicate the outcome of the bet. You have to agree on an authority who's going to be respected by both sides, right? But he thinks, and I agree with him, that if you've got skin in the game, you're a lot less likely to just go around espousing completely ridiculous, fashionable beliefs.
Have you seen anyone notable admit that they were wrong to something that impressed you?
Yeah, I think just recently Neal Ferguson has put out something in this vein where I could be getting it wrong, so I'd need to go back and read
might be
this.
Yeah, I might be wrong.
Yeah, but it was about his assessment of, well, maybe Trump actually has a plan in the realm of foreign policy, and so I would go back and look at like what Neal's put out in the last couple of weeks. That might be a place to look for a graceful, admission of error. But it's really hard. It's the environment of social media is so kind of vituperative that you just know that if you publicly change your mind about anything, you're just going to immediately get deluged with a bunch of really unpleasant posts.
Yeah. I like the word you use, vituperative.
Yeah.
What does it mean in the
I
OED?
asked the same. I'm glad you're brave enough to ask.
I mean, I can extrapolate what it means, but like vivacious.
Oh no,
I'm just kidding.
Vituperation just means vicious, mean-spirited criticism and slander.
Wow.
Okay, we'll use that next week
Yes.
at the office. Vituperate.
We're gonna just slip it in
Slip it in.
to a meeting. I love this. I love learning new words.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know the etymology of it.
yeah. We'll OED it. I love it.
Yeah. No, you have to get the full 20 volume OED.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm gonna look into this.
Gotta get it.
I often like it when Cyan frames it as, for the people listening, I think what I want to synthesize is, so if other people are going to endeavor to try this reframe, how would you synthesize? What would be the Neal invitation for because we're going to end up, part of the show is afterwards, Cyan and I are going to try.
Oh
and
yeah, we
embody this
commit to
reframe.
trying anything that a guest comes on and tells us.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So we put it on and try it on like
Yeah.
clothes.
Yeah.
So where would you start? Yeah.
Or how would you articulate it? Because folks listening, we want also. So maybe do it as guidance to us, and by that proxy, others.
I mean, different-
That's the reframe.
People respond to different cues, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's never a one-size-fits-all way to approach this. So, I mean, I got to it by reading Jonathan Rauch's book, Constitution of Knowledge, and I just felt like, oh hell yes, every page he's saying out loud something that I've been vaguely thinking, for years, and then the purse stuff is also reads incredibly fresh. It's written in obviously kind of Victorian era literary style, but it's not impenetrable at all. And he lands some points that really work. I've tried to pull those out in my. I'm not here to advertise my Substack, but I've tried to pull those out. The really good pull quotes and embed them in my Substack posts. But I don't know. Beyond that, like, is there a practical thing you could do? For me, it's just to be less. I don't like to be skeptical in a hostile or confrontational way, but just now when I see somebody who's trying to explain or justify a belief, with what sounds like a rational argument, I keep thinking of Plato and his completely bullshit theory of how astronomy worked. So you can respect someone for their intellect and their sincerity, while still suspecting that they may have, strayed from a really sound way of thinking. That doesn't have to be a demeaning or a negative way to interact with someone.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you're saying is, maybe in a moment when we're maybe hearing somebody of high conviction or high belief or something that feels right.
Yeah.
We take a moment to check in with ourselves and maybe contemplate either the opposite or they might be wrong, or maybe in the opposite. If I feel in a moment where I'm coming at it like, how could you do this or whatever?
Yeah.
I might be wrong. That's how I don't know. How are you internalizing
Yeah, I
it?
think also becoming comfortable with not knowing.
And not knowing.
Because you said that people come up with those four systems and they're kind of a crutch or a Band-Aid for this discomfort of not knowing. And I thrive when I don't know what I'm going to be doing or where I'm at or who I'm with. And I find joy in that. And I think some people, it makes them really miserable. Like they want to know everything they can. And so maybe letting go of that is another reframe, which is just, it's okay. It's okay to just not know.
Yeah.
It can be
Yeah.
beautiful,
That's freeing.
actually.
And Peirce has a really good description of, I can't remember his exact terminology, but it's just this irritation and anxiety that some people feel, not you apparently, but a lot of people feel if they don't know what to believe, so they can't let it go. They'd rather believe something that's wrong than exist in the state of not knowing.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a Portlandia episode that I love where they show up and they have to go through the topics of the day.
Okay.
And they're like, have you heard? Have you heard? And it's like a village thing of gossip. And then one person didn't read one article, and so they start admonishing them. They're like, well, you didn't read that. There's this expectation
Yeah.
because news is ever present
Right.
that we're supposed to know everything
Yeah.
at any time. And I think we just need to get rid of that.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think that might be the key to it right there. And it took me a long time to be comfortable with that. I think a few years ago, shortly before he passed away, I had a chance to interview Freeman Dyson on stage, the great physicist, when he passed through town, and I did a lot of work for it, because you don't want to go on stage with Freeman Dyson and just flub it. Look, it's not a recoverable
There's some
error.
things you can wing and some things you can't.
Yeah. So I really tried to do my homework, but what I did come away with, was that he and other people I've met who are really at the top of their professions in mathematics, science, whatever, are just completely untroubled by admitting that they're not familiar with something. And the flip side of that is curiosity. So, they'll say, I don't know anything about that, but please tell me. It sounds really interesting. I'd like to learn more about it. So I think kind of the negative side of it is saying you don't know, but the positive side of it is, oh, fantastic, here's a new thing that I can learn.
Yeah.
We're also giving someone an opportunity to be a teacher.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
it's
Which
a bid for
integrates-
connection. Oh my gosh.
The lesson,
Yeah.
if they can actually regurgitate it to you.
Totally.
That's right. Yeah, that is the best way to learn something, is to teach it, for sure.
Cool. I like this. There's a lot of and I like that there's a lot of ways to practice the reframe, because it could just be telling someone you don't know.
I've already been doing the I'm wrong thing, but I'm excited to go deeper
Yeah.
into it.
I love
I will
this.
really, I'm going to Baton for a couple of weeks, and I'm sure I'm going to find a lot of wrong that I've been wrong about while I'm there.
Yeah.
Nothing like immersing yourself in a culture that's
Yeah.
not yours to figure out
Yeah.
those truths that you hold dear might need to
Totally.
be questioned.
And one thing I want to call out with, just for me, I know my fear of saying I don't know comes from, it's rooted in safety. I'm fearful to let others know that I don't know something, because I want to be perceived as competent, knowledgeable. That's the source of what I believe is worthiness, at least for me. So it is the lie I tell myself is that if I say I don't know, I won't be respected. I won't be loved. I won't be, and that's actually the opposite. If I said I don't know, it's an opening to be taught. It's an opening to, even if I know it a little bit, I think that's my bend. Most things I know, some things I know a little bit, but even in that moment of knowing a little bit, how do I say still, I don't know, tell me more. I think that's my leap. So
There is, I think, particularly among guys, there's a certain kind of dynamic around dominance
Yes.
that enters into this, because it relates to the topic of mansplaining, where when mansplaining first broke the surface as a thing that people talked about, I thought it was fascinating because, I've been mansplained to my whole life, right? So it's just a way that guys in certain situations kind of establish a kind of dominance.
Masculine energy.
Yeah. And I think it's been going on forever, and I've put up with it my whole life. But the emergence of mansplaining as a term came when women who were subjected to this were like, saw it through the lens of gender relations, right? And so to be the person to whom something's being explained is to be lower in the social hierarchy, and guys, well, no one, but particularly guys, don't want to place themselves in that position.
Yeah.
And so you see this all the time where, if you're trying to explain something to somebody who's gripped by that kind of insecurity, they'll be, I know, no, I know all about that, I even see this with toddlers, they'll insist that they know something that they can't possibly, that they don't know.
This is where momsplaining.
Yeah.
I would appreciate the moment when Cyan I dreamed up this show. I don't think in our wildest imaginations would Neal Stephenson be talking to us about mansplaining.
No, I love it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. We have a few final. We're on to the dessert portion of our meal. We have a few things we probably have one or two questions.
Oh, so let me just let me just wrap that up.
Please.
The power of leadership, it's the kind of leadership that you see from somebody like Freeman, where he has the stature to kind of break that cycle. So, I don't know. Could you explain it to me? And then that, in a way, it's really an assertion of authority and strength to be able to say that at all. And it's something that I think we can learn from, and it throws people off guard, like, and then hopefully it then gives them an opportunity to talk in a non-mansplaining way, but just, well, this is really interesting, let me explain it to you. And so you can really, I think, break down some negative forms of social interaction by surprising people with the I don't know, could you explain it to me trick. And you may find out that they don't know either, and they're completely full of shit. But those are all good outcomes.
No, thank you.
It's interesting when you meet a politician who can do that. I've only met one, which is Pete Buttigieg, and I asked him a question, and I'm not politically completely aligned with him, but I was so impressed, and it's why I backed him actually, which shocked a lot of people because they were like, "We didn't see that coming," but it was because I asked him a question, and he said, Cyan, I don't know. And he's like, but I'm going to get a bunch of smart people in the room, and we're going to talk about it. And at the end of it, we'll try to come to the best conclusion. Yeah. And I looked at him, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
How refreshing.
Yeah.
Wow. I want a leader like that.
Yeah. I don't know, is vulnerable.
It's
and
so
it creates
vulnerable.
Space.
And there was a lot of gravitas to it as well. Like a lot of us in the room felt, wow, like I have a voice in this. Everyone here has a voice in this. And at some point he's going to pick a decision and do something, but he's going to listen. And I think that's what this gives people room to do is listen, which is an important part of it, I think.
So good. Listening. Cool. And thank you. That was a great add-on.
And if you think about something you've been wrong about, feel free to pipe up.
Yeah. I like that. Well, the dessert portion, it's coffee, a sweet and maybe a mint. So we'll each ask you what maybe a lingering final question. Oh, here we go.
Okay, I got one.
You got one. Okay, good.
So
Yes.
so when I was involved in the company that originally became Blue Origin, I was completely dead set in the belief that conventional chemical rockets, were not the way to get lots of stuff into space, and that we had to come up with a completely different kind of technology. And now you can see the Starship booster getting plucked out of the air by giant tweezers. It's just a incredible development in where it's gone since then, and it's all based on iterating on technologies that are old and that I didn't think had a future. So I was wrong about that. So there
That's
you
a
go.
good one.
Yeah.
That's very good.
I
Thank
like
you.
it. And thank you for your tenacity to get at a.
Yeah,
get at
no,
it
it
wrong.
takes me a while.
Well, like you said, you're going to leave here, and then all of a sudden you're going to be like,
yeah. Text us.
But
yeah.
maybe it'll be future Substack material.
Yeah. Future Substack.
Yeah.
Well, we have a few small follow-ups.
Yeah, sorry.
No apologies needed. Sam and I will each ask you a remaining lingering question. This is kind of like a grab bag, just something that is alive for us right now to close.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want you to be prepared for this. We have a ritual on the show. This is one of Cyan's dice rollers.
Okay.
And while we commit to a reframe, we invite our guests to come up with 2 things that you want to aspire to commit to. And I'll let Cyan explain the intention of the dice. But the idea is to choose 2 things that you might, maybe you're
waffling on.
Waffling on. That's the perfect word. But do you want to share your dice? Why?
Yeah.
dice?
So during the pandemic, I asked a lot of questions, starting with what am I wrong about? But I also tried to break myself out of mechanical habits. And I started noticing that I was spending a lot of time in decision paralysis. And what if random is better than anything I could come up with? So I started making lists of 6 things to do. I would put like one uncomfortable thing on there that I was, didn't want to do.
Yeah, you've been avoiding.
That I've been avoiding.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it almost always lands on that one. But what I would do is roll, and I use it to figure out what to eat, what to do. And then interestingly, my friends know that I'm so crazy about it. Whatever it lands on, I must commit to it, that I've started using it as a threat. So if I'm in a group setting and they're like, oh, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, okay, well, just get the dice. And they're immediately, they go straight to what they want to do.
That's great.
And so it's a really great forcing function. So our invitation today is, are there 2 things that you can share that you're waffling about, that maybe the dice might put you in a direction, might help you solidify that.
Exactly.
And maybe you don't need help with this kind of thing, but
Not for you to answer now, but this is so you know what's coming up. That's a piece of the dessert. I can see you thinking already. I love that. And then we have a little surprise for you, so we'll share that later. But maybe we can do our last questions each. I don't know if you have a lingering question you want to ask Neal.
Oh gosh,
it doesn't have to be on the thread of wrong, but just
Well, I'm sure that you get approached by fans a lot, and so you've been asked every question, told everything. But has there been anything where you have reframed someone's existence and they've come up to you and said, that really struck you, that you didn't know that words or your art or what you're doing could even have that power? And does any stories stick out for you?
I mean, there's a number of them that are, maybe what you would expect. Like, I read your book. when I was in high school, I decided to study computer science kind of thing. So that's all great. But I'm trying to think of examples where I was amazed, that weren't that kind of obvious. I think, this doesn't totally hit it on the head, but an interesting thing in this realm has been the number of people who've come up to me and said, I really like the Diamond Age, and I'm going to implement the I'm an MIT or whatever, I'm a grad student, and I'm working on building the primer, the Diamond Age, whatever, and then they all say something completely different. So it's not like they're all doing the same thing. It's that everyone came away from it with a completely different take on what it should look like, how it should be built, none of which are wrong. But it's been interesting to me to, some people are like, well, I want to build the, what the screen technology, or I want to make reactors, or, they all focus on one element of it that somehow speaks to them. And so that's been I kind of learned really early not to endorse any one particular one of these, because that would imply that everyone else was somehow wrong, or taking an incorrect path. So that's been kind of interesting to watch, just the range of ideas that people came away with. I don't know. I'm not good at these. I'm a good thinker, but I'm a slow thinker.
I'm a slow thinker too. So I think funny thing is, someone will tell me a joke, and sometimes I get it weeks later, or I come with there's a French word for this. For
it's a stairwell remark.
Yeah, where you come back later.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's me. I'm a very slow thinker.
Yeah.
Well, I like you're planting the seed. If anything comes up, let us know. I love that question. It's a really good question.
Yeah, maybe what you're thinking of is the stairwell remark, where you're arguing with somebody in a meeting, and you're inarticulate, you can't say the right thing, and then an hour later, as you're going down the stairs to leave the building, you're like, you come up with the perfect line that you should have spoken in the meeting. But
I like that. And I'll find the French word too. I like that.
Awesome.
My question for you is, it's a little goofy, of the song that comes to mind. There's like an old 90s song, Where Have All the Cowboys Gone?
Yeah. Paula Cole.
Paula Cole. Okay, great.
See, I'm old.
We have a shared song language. Saya and I have talked about this. I guess the question is like, where have all the sci-fi writers gone? What I mean by that is, obviously there are people who, when we think of who've created these worlds, you think of the Neal Stephensons of the world. I'm curious, who are the next generation of, is it writers? Is that the form factor that they are in? Are they in other modalities? Obviously in the work that in trying to partner new creations, we are trying to collaborate with people who are imagining the world.
Yeah.
And obviously you're an inspiration to so many. Where have all the cowboys
Yeah, a
gone?
lot of my investments are based off your writing.
Yes. And the fact that there is no, just like there's no John Grisham, the 20-year-old John Grisham, what's 20-year-old Neal Stephenson now look like, and I'm curious how you experience that.
It's a really interesting question. And, I'll say that in the spirit of our earlier discussion, that I don't know, because I don't follow what's happening in science fiction very closely. I never have, just because it can get really complicated if you're both trying to write original science fiction and trying to read everything that comes out. So I've tended not to be very well read. But there's there has been a turn, a cultural shift away from what we think of as hard, classic hard science fiction, towards a more diverse list of writers and themes, and so I think that instead of being kind of a unitary, monolithic genre, it's spread out in a lot of ways, and become more diffuse. So there's not the Isaac Asimov, or the Heinlein out there anymore, who has that kind of huge position. And the another factor is that it's gotten very difficult to stay ahead of what's actually happening. So if I'm Heinlein in the 1950s, I can look at I can look at the V2, or what's happening with ballistic missiles and say, oh, well, if you build a big one of those, you could put people on it and they could go to other planets, right? And so that's all easy to extrapolate, and it's all, but it's happens slow enough that by the time you write the book, it will still seem like a valid science fictional concept, right? Whereas with the way things change now in the world of technology, stuff happens before you even have heard of it. And even if you do, and things happen that are difficult to, it's not just a matter of simply extrapolating an obvious trend, but suddenly two things will intersect in some weird way, and you get this emergent result that is hard to. It's just hard to think up ahead of time, and then when it does happen, it happens with such speed that by the time you've written the book and got it out the door, it's already old hat. So I had to rewrite part of Fall. Because it was, I was, part of it deals with kind of trends in politics and social media. And after I'd written it, was the first time Trump got elected. And that was just so far outside the band of where I was thinking that I realized that everything I'd written was just too old and slow, and I needed to go back and, and sort of redo it. So I think a lot of people in the field are kind of struggling with that a little bit now. And so it's easy to, what are you going to do? You can try to go thousands of years out and do very far future or almost like fantasy type worlds. But it's there's I'm thinking of like The Expanse. That's that's falls into a nice sweet spot where that's extrapolating technologies we know about, and it's just far enough out that it's not too late.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Yeah, but it's kind of believable. It's based on one or two fictional advances in technology that then the whole kind of world is built around. So I don't know. It's a combination of all these factors. I think it's a lot of it. There's a strong, I think, gender component to it, where the book industry has swung in recent years pretty strongly female in terms of the people who work in it and the people who actually buy the books. And a lot of people have noticed this and are asking themselves, what's going on? Why don't is, which is the chicken and which is the egg? Is it that the publishing industry has, stopped publishing books that that men want to read, or is it that men stopped reading books because they want to play video games or whatever, and the publishing industry is just making a rational choice based on the way that the market is headed. So I think that tends to push trends away from what we think of as hard technical science fiction, for better or worse.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Kind of long, rambling answer.
No,
there.
that was
great.
incredibly articulate.
Complicated situation.
Yeah. I have a lot of follow-ups to how we can help. My brain goes, how do we collaborate, how do we help? But we will follow up with you on that. All right. We're going to do the surprise and the dice roll.
Okay.
And then go from there. All right. So, a ritual on our show is, and thank you so much for being open and to share your heart and your mind. Actually, I'm too hospitality minded. I'm going to give you some water. Do you want some water?
Oh, I'm good.
You're good?
We're
Okay.
almost done, yeah.
We've invited two people who have experienced you in a variety of ways to share their reframe of what they think your reframe is, or how a reframe you taught them.
Okay.
So I'm just going to play it.
We don't listen to it
we
first.
don't listen to it.
Okay.
So we have
beforehand.
no idea what they're going to say.
So it's just and it always makes me really nervous to share it because I haven't, and I hope it works. Let's see.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. We're in the middle of the show right now. The audio file you shared sounded a little tornado-y. My word, not yours. Would you be open to sharing your reframe live? Neal's listening. And right now.
I'm at a Vietnamese restaurant.
Even better.
I would say that one of the things that I've observed several times with Neal is this rather extraordinary ability to be willing to learn completely new technologies to solve a creative problem. Working on a sword fighting game where he had to figure out how to turn 15th century sword fighting techniques into mocap, or going to Magic Leap and learning all about AR hardware, and then learning parts of Unreal that were sequencer in Unreal. So it's kind of like getting into a new creative area, finding a technical problem that needed solving, and going deep has always been an astonishing thing to me to watch, and he's done it over and over again. So I'm not sure if that's really a reframe. It's a reframing pattern.
Totally.
And not only the ability to learn these things, which astonishes me, but the willingness to do it is a thing that I've observed over the years.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for
You're most
sharing.
welcome. Yeah.
We'll have to send you the episode, but
Please
it
do.
really links to a theme we were talking about
Yeah,
before,
it does.
like to almost a T. So, well, Karen, thank you for hopping in. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
And Neal's smiling, listening to you. So,
In his own way.
in his own
All
way.
right. Well, enjoy. Talk to you later.
Enjoy your boba. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Anyway, how did you experience that, Neal?
It's got some static.
Yeah, I'm getting off of. This is just Karen's. Go
Okay.
ahead. Thank you.
I mean, we did actually talk about this specific thing before, so
Yeah.
it's good to have it ratified by the observant eye of Karen. But I mean, I think that this I've been pursuing for a long time some way to bring together my nerdy proclivities with storytelling. And that has led me down a bunch of crazy roads over the years. It's how Snow Crash happened. I was working on graphic novel project, and I ended up writing a lot of code to do image processing and learned all, weird computer languages and so on. And that project didn't meet with commercial success on its own, but then out when that was over, I wrote Snow Crash, and it was very strongly informed in a lot of ways by the technical details of bitmaps and stuff I had to learn on that project. So I've still got I bought the first Mac when it came out in '84. And I programmed it to make little fractal islands, just imaginary landscapes. So it's just been a kind of thing I keep coming back to over and over again. And every time I circle back and do something new, the technology has gotten 1,000 times better, and there's a lot more to learn, and I enjoy learning it. And I enjoy working with things at the most granular level that I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is just by being you're teaching other people how to live.
Totally.
So that's what I hear from Karen.
Totally.
Which is you've helped her see ways that she could live, and I'm sure countless others. And it inspires me, too, because I'm a curious person.
Yeah.
But other people are watching you.
Yeah.
We're teachers whether we want to be or not.
Yeah. That's what I took away, too.
That's well said. I think if there's anything to be taught there, it's that there's joy to be found, and there's value in diving into things at the most nitty-gritty level and not delegating it or expecting someone else to do it for you. And the tools that we have at our disposal now, just thanks to the development of technology and the open source movement and so on, are and YouTube as a pedagogical system make it possible to just build things in a very hands-on way in a manner that wasn't available to me, even though I had a lot of advantages when I was a kid.
Cool. And thanks for sharing that. We have a final. Cyan's idea was to get somebody who we know, who experienced you in a formative way. So I just texted last night a buddy of mine. His name is Charlie. He's actually one of the most curious people that I know. Studied liberal arts, went to work in investment banking of all things, taught himself how to code, 4 years into finance, is now the head of engineering at a company. So literally said I don't know probably every single step of the way. Here's a 60-second message. We'll see. Let's see if this one works.
Garage office surrounded.
Great.
I'm sitting in this garage office surrounded by a bunch of science fiction and fantasy books, of course, with Neal Stephenson books right there, Anathema being my favorite. The thing I've been thinking about is that science fiction, this frivolous, escapist type novel, is actually this roadmap for the future. I think Neal's books really show curiosity, joy, weirdness, history. You can put all these things together and dream and imagine the future. And the wild thing is that because these things are out there as these checkpoints or guideposts, we're starting to build these futures. So, science fiction becoming science future. I feel like Neal Stephenson is all over that, but not doing it in a way where you're preaching. It's doing it in a way where you're filled with joy and curiosity and fun and learning. So that's something I love about Neal Stephenson books. Like so many other Neal Stephenson fans, I love the idea of the Young Ladies Illustrated primer. I've got 2 young kids. I'm often thinking that wouldn't it be great if they had their personalized, perfect Aristotle tutor, just like they were Alexander the Great. But then I remember seeing this Reddit quote where Neal says, kids don't need the Young Ladies Illustrated primer. They just need a parent or an adult who loves them, who answers their questions. I think about that almost every day with my kids. There is no silver bullet ed tech product. there's my attention and my love. So thank you for that quote, Neal.
To help people be a better parent.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that he noticed that quote.
Sorry.
That came out of a experience I had the year after Mount St. Helens blew up. So this would be like 81, 82, I think. And my friend and I went to the site, and it was before they'd set up a visitor center or cleaned anything up. It was just like, devastation everywhere. But there was a road you could drive up. You could drive around and look at stuff. And they had there was a car that had been picked up in the blast and hurled some distance and impacted on the mountainside. And the paint had all been sandblasted off by the hot ash, and it looked like somebody had machine gunned it. It had holes from rocks that had been shot through it, and the upholstery was all melted and burned. It was just a complete wreck. But they had built a little fence enclosure around it, just big enough to enclose the vehicle so you couldn't reach through and touch it. Right. So it was like a tall, very narrow enclosure with this car in the middle of it. So we're looking at it, and this other car pulls up, and the family gets out, and it's a couple parents and a couple kids, and this little kid comes running up. He's a little boy, probably 8 years old, maybe younger. But he starts asking, how did the wind blow the car in there? So he understood that the car had been blown through the air by the explosion, but he just had this one misconception, which was he thought that the fence enclosure was pre-existing, and that the car had been like slam dunked into it perfectly. And he knew enough to know that that was very improbable, that couldn't happen. And so he kept asking, Daddy, how did the wind blow the car in there? How did the wind blow the car in there? And Dad wouldn't answer. And Dad looked like a scary guy. He's just kind of exhausted man in what we call a wife beater t-shirt. He was like tired, and he just looked like a mean guy. And so my friend and I were just dying. We just wanted to turn to this kid and say, no, they built the fence later. Because that's all that needed to be said to relieve him of this, confusion that he was in. And we both decided against it because we didn't think it was going to go over well to make Dad look like a dummy in front of his kids. So finally the family gets back in the car and drives away. And my friend and I just looked at each other like, if we ever have kids, we're going to answer all their goddamn questions. No matter how tired we are, no matter how annoying the questions, you can't. It was like watching this kid's brain being throttled. So I think that the quote that your friend quoted there is me remembering that, reliving that trauma. Yes, I definitely think it's true that that's what kids want and need, is a parent who will answer their questions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be a waste of time to make something like
some kids don't have parents to answer their questions,
Right.
which like Neal didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
right, exactly. So the story of that book has got multiple girls who end up with their own copies of the book, and one of them really needs it, and so her life is changed by it, and the others probably could have gotten along without it. So it's less of a transformative thing for them.
That was my favorite scene. Yeah, where it's like these four or five women are all successful, but Neal would never have been like that without it. Well, thank you. That really moved me. Oh my God, thanks for sharing that. Well, we are at the end of our meal.
Did you think of a dice roll?
Yeah.
Oh God, no, I can't.
Okay,
This is
don't worry
not gonna
about it.
work. Yeah.
Okay. No stress.
I mean, nothing there's always stuff that I equivocate on, but I'm private. I don't like to.
No, that's
Okay.
no problem
No,
at
we
all.
wanna
We're
respect that.
learning through this
Yeah.
process of what people are comfortable with and
Totally.
what they're not.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal thing to share
Yeah.
some things that you're waffling on too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being direct and open with us.
Oh, sure, yeah. No.
Yeah.
All right, Neal. Well, the last part is we basically teleport you out. So
We'll just teleport you out.
Neal out? All right.
Yeah. Thank you for joining
Okay.
us on Reframe and coming in and sharing everything that you have.
It's been
Yeah.
all pleasure.
And I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what the feedback is.
Yeah. Thank you for being open.
Oh, yeah.
For being present and being vulnerable. It really moved me. Yeah. Seriously.
Happy to do it.
Ready? 3, 2, 1. Wow.
Wow.
How are you feeling, Cyan?
I'm feeling like we're getting some reps in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
Yeah.
I think by the time we have 6 to 10 of these done, we're gonna really figure out
Yeah.
like how to draw out the best stories we
Yeah.
possibly can. But I'm very happy with this outcome. It's surprising and delightful, and exceeds my expectations of
Totally.
how this interview would go.
Totally.
And I learned a lot about Neal, and it triggered a memory. Can I share a memory?
Yeah. Please.
And this is a weird one.
Yes.
But I started thinking about someone who admitted to me that they were wrong. And I thought of my grandfather on my mother's side. And when I was younger, and this is going to sound absurd because it was absurd, but in the 80s, the top topic of the time was HIV and AIDS. And my grandfather somehow decided I had AIDS. And he announced it to me. And I was a kid. And I didn't understand how he came to this conclusion or how I'd gotten AIDS. But he thought that if you were flirtatious with boys or you might be sexually active, which I wasn't at the time, that was a gateway to having AIDS, and therefore I must have it. And so when I moved in with him in the 9th grade, he told me, you can't use my toilet, you can't use my shower, you can't use my razor blades, you can't
Wow.
eat off the same silverware because I don't want your disease. And I told him, I was like, well, we could go to a doctor. He's like, oh, this is incurable. And so I went about my life for like a year or more, wondering where he got this idea, knowing it wasn't possible because I wasn't sexually active yet, and just very confused about the whole thing. But later in life, I had a very complicated relationship with my grandfather. I love him and revere him. I looked up to him, but at the same time, he was very bigoted and close-minded and a lot of things that were very negative. I got him a subscription to Scientific American and Omni, and I didn't tell him. I just started shipping them to him. And one time I went back to visit him, and he apologized out of the blue. He said, Cyan, I'm really sorry. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, I've been getting these science magazines in the mail, and it turns out I was wrong about the whole AIDS thing. And I feel really bad. And I realize a lot of people hold truths inside because they're sheltered and they have no exposure and they don't have information available to them. Now, there's less of an excuse today because of the internet, but my grandfather didn't have access to the internet.
Yeah.
He barely had access to a library with books that would have explained this to him. And I just remember thinking how powerful it was to hear that apology from him. And I had long forgotten about it. And I wasn't sending him those magazines to draw that apology. I was trying to broaden his world, and it worked. And so listening to Neal talk really, really brought up that story for me. And so I wanted to share it because it's, and I've written about it in my Substack. And so some people who follow me have read it, but it just really brought it home, like how powerful an apology can be. And so if you're listening to this I would write a list of things you've been wrong about, and I would prescribe that you reach out to people and admit it, and just say, I didn't know any better. I was wrong.
Yeah.
And then see what happens and what kind of doors that opens for you.
That's a great invitation.
Yeah.
And what I'm particularly struck by is you calling out, it was not even something that you thought, you weren't waiting for the apology.
No.
And when gifted to you, it hit you to
Oh, it
your
hit
core.
me
So
way more.
I think that
the
part
apology
is-
had
yeah.
way more gravity
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. And maybe there was a subconscious piece that was seeking something, but you don't know. And that's powerful. I think my takeaway from the conversation is I definitely grew up thinking being wrong was weakness. Being wrong was not enoughness. Being wrong is bad. And that came from a place of good intention, because if you're right, then it is a path to good grades. It is a path to a good job. It is a path. Getting 100% on your tests is a path to abundance. And what I'm taking away from this conversation is, how do I reframe my brain to be flexible, malleable in wrong being okay, and wrong not being weakness, and wrong being about connection. That's really what I'm taking away. Saying I don't know, or saying I'm wrong. Again, I don't know is an iteration of wrong, you could say. It opens doors. So I'm excited to try on the reframe.
I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I feel less alone now.
I feel a lot less alone.
Yeah.
I don't think we're alone now.
I don't think we're alone now.
There seems to be some people who might be listening in.
Yeah. And I have a lot of ideas now in my brain.
Yep.
All right. Let's
Thanks,
teleport ourselves out. 3, 2, 1.